Games, along with Kyle Serafine of Hamilcar Books, who they've been gracious enough to grant me with some copies of their incredible boxing series. And we'll go through all the books. Kyle, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good, Mark. Thanks for having me on, man. Good to
My
see you.
honestly, my pleasure. Last night on my social media pages, I kind of opened the gate to this great giveaway that I'm going to be doing over the next several weeks with the books that you've been gracious enough to give me, and I'm going to be giving out to all the boxing fans around the world. So I appreciate you coming on with us and just discussing all these great books.
Excellent. Appreciate you having me on.
Let's get right down to talk about the series of books. Right now, I got 8 books. I don't know why I said 7. I got 8 books in my possession here. So let's get into the background of it. What gave you and your guys at Hamilcar the idea to start this boxing series?
Okay. Yeah. My background's in publishing. I worked for several Boston publishers for like 18 years, 16, 17, 18 years. And I was actually working in a production manufacturing role, putting the books together. Wanted to be an editor. It's sort of hard sometimes to, break over to the other side if that's not your area, sort of in-house. So I was a boxing fan forever, and I just sort of put the two together as far as my knowledge of books and then knowledge and interest in boxing. And I saw an opening strategically, and then I hooked up with Andy Comack, who's my friend since we were 14 and my business partner. It's just he and I are Hamilcar with a team of freelancers. So it was a strategic decision to kind of focus on the niche. I felt like I had some ideas that big houses sort of didn't have in terms of doing boxing books, and we've executed some of those so far, and we have some in the pipeline too.
Great. Talk about your interest in boxing. Right before we went on, I asked you, you're a boxing fan. You said that was, the one sport, you were growing up as a kid like every other kid who played sports and, liked all the major sports. But you said boxing is the one sport that you've kind of stuck with going forward.
Kind of a weird thing too. It was very clear, like I played for like a little bit of college soccer, played competitive tennis in my teens. High school basketball. Andy was on the high school basketball team. We were terrible, but whatever. Like I could shoot a little bit. And but it's interesting. Like I was so into playing sports, but after it was like a switch went off. Like when I was 20, and I wasn't really interested in, like the Pats, the Red Sox. Not really. It's like I loved watching fights. I remember in my 20s, it was like Tuesday night fights. I watched like every card. And, I think that it's been said by many people many times before, that like the courage, the drama, the technical skill of fighters, there's just no other sport like it. And I think that I just sensed that it pulled me in, it was the one sport that held my interest.
What who are some of your favorite fighters, growing up, and who do you still watch today?
Yeah, Hagler was the main guy, being from Mass.
Brockton, Mass's own.
Hagler, and obviously Ali, and then James Toney as well, like 90s, 2000s. We're actually doing his bio, and we put him on the cover of Dark Trade, which I think you probably have.
Yep.
Amanda Kelly did the painting of James, so it's kind of Ali, Hagler, James Toney, pretty much.
There you go. Okay, so let's go through each book, and we're going to start with the Hamilcar, and now you can pronounce it better. Hamilcar and War book.
Hamilcar was Hannibal was like the Carthaginian general. I'm half Lebanese, and Carthage was a Phoenician colony. That my father always talked about Hannibal when I was a kid. And then Hamilcar is his father, who was also like a commander. So that's where it's like their last name was Barca. It's like the Barca family tree, basically. So yeah, Hamilcar.
Okay, so I got all the books. So I want you to give your little synopsis on 'em. I just got all the books over the weekend. I mean, I love to read, but I can't read about 7,000 pages in the span of a few days. So let's start.
Why not?
Let's start with maybe this one's close to you. Slaughter in the Streets, when when Boston became boxing's murder capital. So here's the book here. So tell us everybody what your thoughts on this book.
Oh, well, first of all, Don Stradley.
He's a tremendous writer. Sorry to interrupt, but
tremendous
yes.
writer. I live in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and he lives in Rockport, which is the next town, which is actually my hometown and where Andy and I grew up. Interestingly, and to make a long story short, he wrote a piece for our site. We got connected to him. He was, we wanted him to write a book pretty much right away, just based on the strength of the piece and what he had done in the past. So that book, as well as the Valero book, grew out of some conversations that, he and I, before the pandemic, would get beers every, couple weeks, once a month at least. And, literally just sit in this Portuguese bar restaurant like a stone's throw from where I am now, and bounce around ideas off each other. And he basically brought up the idea that there are all these guys in the Boston area who were sort of marginal pro fighters and also marginal gangsters, and they had the strange habit of getting murdered, and T.J. English, who actually wrote the foreword, who's a big time true crime writer who wrote the foreword. He, when we approached him to write the foreword, he's like, man, I always noticed that in my research that Boston, more than any other city, had guys who were pro fighters who were involved in organized crime who got killed. So that's sort of the idea behind the book, that it's sort of unusual. A lot of organized crime guys get killed in a lot of cities over the decades, but in Boston they happen to be fighters.
By the way, I'll be picking one name of someone who likes or comments on this video while we're on the air, and I'll tell you guys, pick a winner afterwards. They'll be in line. I'm going to pick one lucky winner to win one copy of one of these books here. So it'd be good to be interactive with this interview. So the next book we have here, actually the next three books, will probably appeal to a lot of the modern boxing fans here. The next book is Berserk, again by Don Stradley, The Shocking Life and Death of Edwin Valerio. Edwin Valerio's, the guy who a lot of people said, what could have been?
Yeah, without question. Even before we started the business, I had a few ideas for books that I really thought were strong, and that was one of them. And Andy and I sort of came up with the concept for the series. Obviously, the books are a little bit shorter, mixed boxing and true crime. And I had the Valero idea, but then when we came up with the idea for that series, I had a list of maybe 3 or 4 subjects. And I met with Don. This is the first time I actually ever met him for coffee in Rockport, my hometown. And I mentioned that idea out of, he picked that idea out of 4 that I had. And just wrote the hell out of that book. That book is a little masterpiece. I think there's probably 26 reviews on Amazon so far, and we pubbed it in November. It's a hell of a book. Valero's story is just, it's just very well suited for a true crime book.
It seemed like, he's a wild man in the ring, and obviously had some wild demons outside the ring. So
I think the mythology as well,
Mm-hmm.
more so than almost any boxing recent boxing story that I can think of, it just has this mythology around it, and it still lingers.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think people still drool over the possibility of what a Manny Pacquiao Edwin Valero fight would have looked like. I still, you go on some of these message boards, and you still, people still talk about what a fight that would have been. So,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
they were hovering around
Mascara
the
fight. The Stradley turned me on to the Mascara fight.
yes, Antonio Mascara.
Which
Yes.
is on YouTube. I would highly recommend that. It's a great YouTube video to pull up on a Saturday night with a glass of wine, man.
Another crazy man who's actually nicknamed Me Vida Loca, My Crazy Life. The Ghost of Johnny Tapia again, and I think the cool thing about this book, the forward is written by his wife Teresa.
Yeah, she wrote an introduction. Yep, and then
The forward is by actually Sammy Hagar. So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question about that. I'm a big Van Halen fan, and I'm a rock and roll guy. So when I saw Sammy Hagar, I was like, okay, this one is obviously Johnny Tapia. All of us who are in the boxing business and know of and knew Johnny Tapia, know the story about all the addiction problems and the talent, especially early in his career, and.
Right.
So talk about that one written by Paul Zanin.
Yeah, Paul, great guy, UK writer. I think he had a lot of these guys that have ended up writing books for us, contributed to our website, Hannibal Boxing.
Mm-hmm.
First, I think that's what happened with Paul, and this is early-ish on. And we were recruiting guys to write books for us, and like Stradley, and then Paul was sort of in the same group as far as the first guys that we had. And he actually had interviewed Teresa Tapia for Boxing Monthly, RIP, and came to me with that idea. He said that he had been talking to her, and I totally perked up when he mentioned Johnny Tapia, especially because Mi Vida Loca is obviously an autobiography. There's been no bio done. And, man, if anyone's seen the HBO documentary, we actually met the woman who wrote the doc. How could you not do that book? It's just, I think it's happened with a lot of our books. We know right away certain subjects we want to do it.
So how did the Red Rocker get involved in this?
He was really good friends with Johnny.
Oh wow! Little known fact.
What's that?
It's a little known fact.
No kidding, right? They partied together. Went to fights.
I can only imagine how much tequila Johnny must have drank then.
The thing with Johnny Tapia, man, is getting to know Teresa Tapia quite well over the phone. He's a great guy.
Yeah,
he just had demons.
Yeah, I met him interviewed him a couple times. He was as chill as can be when I interviewed him.
Such a good person.
Yeah,
it's just unmistakable. Loyal to his wife. Had balls.
Yeah, she
big, courageous. And I think that what happened to him when he was a kid, I think a lot of people would have been affected in a profound way.
He basically watched his mother get murdered.
Right.
Exactly. And Teresa, he said, this story would have ended a lot sooner had it not been for Teresa. She saved him on many, 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 many occasions.
Absolutely. I tell you, it's like you want to talk about the ultimate ride or die relationship.
Yeah.
Like it's inspiring to me because obviously I not only do I acquire the books, but I handle everything, production throughout. So, it's not just reading the manuscript once, and I read it. I read the manuscript. I read the page proofs. I'm working on the copy editing. I copy edit the books too, in addition to my copy editor. I get to know these stories. They get into my blood, and their story, his Johnny story, really, you know, it did get, it moved. I was moved by it, very moved by it.
And finally, and this is a book I know. I mean, if you're not a fan of Arturo Gatti, I mean, everyone's an Arturo Gatti fan. Killed in Brazil: The Mysterious Death of Arturo Gatti, written by Jimmy Tobin. Jimmy actually wrote for my website, 15rounds.com, for a little bit.
Good site.
And thank you, I appreciate it.
Bart
So
Barry.
Bart's the man. So I mean, obviously this story played out a lot. I mean, there's a lot of still unanswered questions. I'm actually very friendly with Arturo's manager and his everything, Pat Lynch, who's probably one of the greatest guys in the sport. So to talk about this book.
Well, Jimmy is one of our main guys. Like for our site, he and Carlos Azevedo are kind of our two big guns, and Jimmy's an exceptional writer, very talented,
Yep.
and knows boxing as well. He's just the perfect kind of guy that we were looking for. And a lot of our books come about with me just brainstorming with our authors, and that's how this one came up. At first the idea came up initially, and then we were thinking about a couple other things, and then I don't know. I think to a degree, just sort of came back to it. I was like, you know what? Like this is a perfect story for the series. There's a lot of, as the subtitle indicates, it's very mysterious. I think people get pulled in by books like that, where people don't know what really happened.
And obviously Gotti, I mean, he was a franchise. I was at every one of his fights in Atlantic City. I actually became friendly with him at the end. We actually hung out. I remember it was the Kelly Pavlik Jermaine Taylor fight. Me and him actually spent some time.
The first one?
The first one in Atlantic City.
Oh man!
Yeah, he was there. He was there hanging out, and we spent some time, kind of getting to know each other. So.
That's a good story, man. That's one of my favorite fights. I love.
No, it was a tremendous fight.
Unbelievable. My friend was over. We went crazy.
Yeah, I actually I used to do some broadcasting for a defunct online streaming site, and I was trying to get him into, I think he had just finished up his career, and he loved the idea of possibly doing some commentating, especially some local shows, because we did a lot of shows up in New York, New Jersey area, and I would have loved to have done some commentating with him, and it's obviously a shame what happened. All the research, and I don't know if you've talked to Jimmy about this. What are your thoughts on what did happen or didn't happen? I think did happen in Brazil.
Yeah. That it's a good question. You know what I mean? I think that Jimmy did a good job sort of telling both sides of the book. I think that the story that is, the case for his wife having a hand in it, and also the case for suicide. Like, to be completely honest, I think it's hard to prove definitively that the wife did something, but it's very fishy. And then on the other hand, I think with the difficult fights that Arturo had, and what that can do in terms of CTE and affecting someone's mood, then, honestly, I actually don't.
Like I said, I just got all the books over the weekend. Is there anything in there? I remember one of the stories that came out around that was, which obviously would kind of make it look fishy on her end, about a life insurance policy or a will that was changed. Is that part mentioned in the book?
Before he went down.
Yes.
Yeah. I know that I've seen the 48 Hours episode.
Correct, I saw that.
Well, and they sort of like focus on that. So that's what I meant. Like there are fishy
Mm-hmm.
elements, and it's just hard to, prove. I guess obviously they couldn't prove definitively that something happened, foul
Guess
play.
so. Those are all the small books that that they run. You probably can bang some of those books out probably in a couple hours reading those books. And now I got four more titles that gonna take a little bit longer to read. And I know there are a lot of fans out there that want to that just want to read and love to read like myself. So we'll start with Jacob's Beach, The Mob, the Guard, and the Golden Age of Boxing. This is about this nice little 250 page book, 250 page book. Say that a few times fast. Written by Kevin Mitchell. So obviously the title's self-explanatory. And Kyle, I want you to expound on that.
Yeah, Jacob's Beach is Mike Jacobs, who's sort of ticket guy, sort of slash czar of Madison Square Garden, like the 30s and 40s. It sort of starts with him and some of the other guys, sort of who were involved in organized crime, like in the 20s and 30s, but then later, late 40s. And into the 50s, you had Frankie Carbo and Blinky Palermo, who sort of, with the IBC, ran boxing. And that, Kefauver, the hearings and sort of like the government going after these guys. Eventually they did, the government caught up with them, and Carbo went to jail, I think, for 25 years, Blinky for like 18, 17. But, when those guys were doing their thing, they ruled the sport with an iron fist. A couple of really interesting characters, Carbo and Palermo, as well as the guys they were involved with in the IBC. If there's a lawyer, names are escaping me right now, but it was a really kind of tangled web in terms of what was going on in boxing in the 50s. And a guy like Ike Williams, for example, was really exploited by those guys and ended up with no money and really in bad shape.
Yeah, I read some other books a few years ago. There was a couple chapters in these books that focused on that, and yes, I mean it's definitely some interesting stuff. And now you got 250 pages of it. It's very, very interesting stuff.
I think that book is the definitive book of the mob and boxing, like mid 20th century.
Correct.
Kevin Mitchell's a Guardian writer, and then we actually reissued the book and did another copy edit. Redesigned the whole thing. I think if someone wants to read about the history of organized crime and boxing, like that's the definitive book, if not one of maybe two or three.
Yeah. Well, the book I'm referring to just had a chapter or two, but this I'm looking forward to read. You'd mentioned
Yep, it's good.
You had mentioned Carlos Acevedo before. I know he's a tremendous writer. Sporting Blood, the Tales from the Dark Side of Boxing. Obviously, again, self-explanatory. What can you add to that?
Carlos, I was a fan of his for a long time. Doing a book with him was an idea that I had very early on. And, that book captures, I think his best work. There's some unbelievable stuff in there. There's an Aaron Pryor essay, one on Tyson that's unbelievable. Mike Quarry. I think the thing with Carlos is he picks great subjects, but his prose is so good.
Mm-hmm.
He could almost write about anything and pull someone in, and that's the kind of thing that's a type of writer that we look for, is someone who is so good that you're just reading that stuff compulsively.
Yeah.
That happened with Berserk. I was working on the page proofs of that, and I just found myself involuntarily kind of just reading sections of the book, you know, just getting pulled in and kind of lost in it. Same thing with Carlos's stuff and our other guys too. Charles Farrell is like that. He's writing a book, his memoir. I'm actually working on the manuscript right now, and it's publishing in January. And his stuff pulls you in like no one's business. It does me too.
Next book is about a fighter, one of the more underrated fighters that has been around the last, I'd say, 40 plus years, only because he came at a time where the heavyweight division, they call it the golden age of the heavyweights, with Frazier, Foreman, Ali, and there's so many great contenders, whether it was the Oscar Bonavinas, whether it was the Jimmy Ellis's, or George Chuvalo. So many off the ropes.
Jimmy Young.
Jimmy Young, yeah. The Ron Lyle story, so written by Candace Toft, forwarded by Al Bernstein. So I mean Al Bernstein, who I had the pleasure of working with on a fight card last year to do some broadcasting. Obviously, that gives the book his name along with the author and Ron Lyle. Talk about that. Expand anything in this book that you make a nugget that you can maybe tell the fans about.
Sure. I think everyone knows that Lyle was in jail. Almost got stabbed to death in jail. And that scene is, sort of mythological in terms of his story. It sort of gets into his experience in jail and how he started to fight. And that episode, he lost like 35, pints of blood or whatever. Just really kind of, compelling, chilling kind of thing. Interesting thing is we had a guy contact us who was a surgical assistant at the prison where at the Canyon City just outside of Denver, which was really interesting. It's a very strange thing. You publish books and sometimes people come out of the woodwork for good or ill, and he told us, about that, and that he said it wasn't quite 35 pine. I don't know. He gave us like the inside story. And the wild thing was this guy, I forget his name, but he was the prison surgeon wouldn't he somehow interfered with this guy getting parole because he was such a good surgical assistant as well. But that story is in the book is very harrowing. And then, and also sort of like the scenes where, Lyle was charged with murder twice, and it covers like the sort of gang fight where this guy got shot that caught, Lyle basically covered for his friend, according to pretty much everyone. And he wouldn't even admit it later. He covered for a friend of his, as I understand it, because he was like, like a big guy and could handle prison. That's the kind of guy he was, total stand-up guy, so that, there's some of that stuff in there, like rough and tumble kind of upbringing in Denver, which is kind of cool too. And then, the fights, which everyone knows Lyle Foreman, and that's covered in the fight more than any other place that you're going to probably read about it, because it's a book about him.
Yeah. And he's a guy, if he would have came along at different eras in boxing, he probably would be, would have won a couple world titles and, would be much more remembered. But he came along
think so.
Fighting all the greatest.
Like he didn't really. He lost to Foreman, Ali, Jimmy Young, and Jerry Quarry. Like,
and Frazier was around at that time, and
and I guess right. Like I think Lyle basically ran out of gas. A couple, I think he ran out of gas versus Foreman. Ali caught him with a right hand on the chin. I think he was a little out of gas. Then, if anything, it was a little bit of stamina stuff because he was so muscular.
The longtime matchmaker Zach Pamilio chimed in, said his favorite fight photo is Lyle walking away from a face down Ernie Shaver. So
Right.
So
That's in the book. That's
in
in the book. Yeah, we have photos. Yep.
Okay, I was looking for it before, but I just want to get the last book. This is the biggest one, 530 plus pages. Dark Trade, Lost in Boxing by Donald McCrae. Talk about this book.
Yeah, it's classic. A lot of people think it's top 3 or 5 boxing books ever written. Real masterpiece. Don is an incredible writer, I think, as everyone knows. Wonderful person as well. Andy and I have gotten to know him since we, pubbed the book and in the production process and all that. We noticed that the book hadn't been published in the U.S. This was basically just a little bit over 2 years ago that we actually approached Don and did the deal. Part of it was putting James Toney on the cover. The book is, James is. There's a lot of guys covered in the book. In addition to James, like Holyfield, Tyson, Prince Dassim, Roy Jones.
By the way, happy 54th to Tyson today. Today's his birthday.
What's that?
Happy 54th to Tyson today.
Yeah, right. But I was drawn to the book originally because I was a big fan of James's, and I thought the writing was fantastic. In that era, it's like, come on, like who doesn't love the '90s, right?
Of course.
So that it was sort of like an easy decision to publish it, and then I think sort of like the nice part about it as well was actually commissioning that painting of James that's on the cover, and Amanda Kelly did that painting, and she actually just did another painting for us. Don Stradley's writing a book about the Hagler-Hearns fight called The War, and she painted a painting for that book cover. We did a tweet we tweeted it. It's somewhere in our Twitter feed. That painting's gonna blow. It already blew people away.
Mm-hmm.
I think she posted it, a picture of it on her easel, and it got like 600 likes on Twitter or something like that. Like, she's unbelievable. I think she's the best in the world. And that, I know there's at least one other guy who's pretty awesome too, but Sloan. But Amanda's an unbelievable artist, fine artist.
You mentioned, obviously, we just blew through 8 books really quickly. You managed Hagler-Hearns. Are you at liberty to say what other subjects are in the pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a huge book for us that's coming out August 25th.
Oh wow!
It's a book about Bundini Brown.
Okay, character.
I was always intrigued by Bundini, and I actually wrote maybe 8 or 10 pieces for our site. Where this is early days, like bootstrapping, and like we noticed this piece I wrote about Bundini. Andy noticed, my partner, to his great credit, like that it was getting a lot of traffic, like a lot of traffic, and it kind of. What I basically said was he was the greatest hype man in boxing history.
Mm-hmm.
That if, a lot of people consider Ali to be the first, the sort of prototypical MC in terms of hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Bundini was almost like the first Flavor Flav or something, So we found a guy, Andy identified him, and I approached Todd Snyder to write the book. Todd had written a memoir about his father called 12 Rounds in Lowe's Gym, which his father was a West Virginia coal miner, had a boxing gym. It's like this terrific memoir. But Todd's a professor of hip-hop studies at Siena College. So the book involves, it's a bio about Bundini and his days with Ali.
But kind of maybe ties that
Yeah.
era to the hip hop era of today.
You know what it is? It's sort of like there's a lot of cultural stuff in the book, a lot of cultural elements, which
Yeah,
I think will really pull people in. Like Bundini was in two of the Shaft movies, for example. You
yeah,
know, I don't know if everyone knows that, but you know, the thing is that Bundini's life was like an African American life,
yeah,
a great one, a remarkable one. You know, he wasn't just that was the point that I was trying to make in the piece that I wrote was that, and Todd's obviously just taken it and it's a whole other thing. The kernel was that like Bundini really didn't get the respect he deserved. He was he was a genius in his own way.
mm-hmm,
He wasn't just like a flunky like at all, you know. And you know, or like the movie Ali, the Michael Mann's movie, they implied that he was a junkie, which is
yeah,
total bullshit, you know, and like upset
yeah.
his family and all that. So we're kind of, you know, I think this book is first going to set the record straight. Two, it's really going to entertain people. There's a lot of different dimensions to this book, and it looks at the Ali story from an angle that really hasn't been done either. You know,
And that comes out August 25th. So
August, my mother's birthday.
we'll keep an eye on that. So I mean, are those two? I mean, the Hagler Hearns fight. Everyone. I mean,
Yeah, and then I was just gonna say, like in October we have a Hector Camacho um, bio. Hold on, this is the. These are like the advanced reader copies. But
Oh,
this is the
wow,
Bundini
okay.
Book. You see it?
Yep.
Yep. And then in October we have it's still Macho Time.
It'd still always be Macho Time. Yeah.
Macho Time. And the case of that book is going to be all leopard print. We have the back of the dust jacket is his chain, his
wow.
Macho chain with gold foil. And the only thing that we couldn't do is like have the book smell like cologne.
I see Junior around from time to time. He's a good man, Junior.
He's great. Junior's fantastic.
He contributed to the book.
He did.
Okay.
He was involved very closely with Chris Giudice, who wrote Hands of
Yeah,
Stone.
I know Chris. He lived right outside Philadelphia for a time. Now I believe he's down
exactly.
south. Wrote the
Jersey.
Duran book. Yeah, good guy, Chris.
Yeah, very good guy. A great writer too. And Junior was closely involved with this book.
Great.
It's very moving, you know, as a father-son story.
Okay.
In addition to Macho's story. So I think that people are really, really going to dig it. You know.
Well, we can't wait for those titles and all the titles that you're gonna have coming down the line. I'm obviously you guys are incredible to bless me over the next several weeks. I'm gonna be giving all kinds of copies of these books. I already told. I went down to my post office yesterday. I said, get ready. I'm gonna be a familiar face in this place over the next several weeks. So you know, I guess I appreciate your time, Kyle. Where do we find you guys on social media?
Yeah, we obviously Twitter, the Hannibal Boxing account, the Hamilcar Publications account. We have websites for Hannibal is the journalism site. Carlos and Jimmy contribute to that regularly, as does Paul Zanin. And then the HamilcarPubs.com is the book site, and you know everyone can find our books there. And you know, in terms of finding our books, people can buy directly from our site with the there's a discount. I think it's a 40% discount. Buy directly. We have a store on our site, and then Amazon, your local bookstore, Barnes and Noble. We have major distribution of our books. Most of our books should be in Barnes & Noble on the shelves.
One last question. Obviously, most of these fighters, in fact, all these fighters, their careers are pretty much over, or unfortunately are deceased. There's one fighter today that one active fighter today that we will see a book about from you guys. Obviously, are you do you think of that? Obviously, there's a lot of great stories of boxing. Did you think of that? Of okay, I like his story, and in 10 years, we're going to do one on him. Is there one guy out there that jumps to the top of your head?
It's really It's hard to say.
Okay.
Like I guess the straight answer is no.
Okay.
But I think that you know, like with James's book, for example, you know, without 2003, it would have been, despite the fact that he was my favorite
Hmm.
fighter, a book has to have a certain arc, and without 2003 with beating Jirov especially, and then Holyfield, like, so it's hard to know. I think that you have to look at a guy's career, especially the kind of books that we're doing. You have to look at the whole career after it's over. Otherwise you get sort of, they do this in the UK especially, like Tyson Fury book or a book about AJ. Like, it's sort of like a topical kind of commercial sort of bestseller type of book, and we don't really do that. Our books have more literary weight and look at the whole trajectory of someone's life.
One last question from one of our YouTube viewers. What was the website again? So I can type it in the thing.
Yeah, it's HamilcarPubs.com, HamilcarPubs.com.
Okay, I just put it on the thing. Well, Kyle, I appreciate your time here on a Tuesday night. 41 minutes, it's not bad. 42 minutes, actually.
All right.
Not too
It was a
bad.
real pleasure.
And I look forward to having each individual author on as we get through, as we continue to go through the summer. We look forward to. I can't wait to get into reading them. Actually, I have a trip. I got to go somewhere in a couple days, so I'm gonna be sitting in the back of the car. I think I know what I'm going to be doing. So
Excellent. Mark, I really appreciate it, man.
thank you
Thanks for
very
having me
much,
on.
and we'll be talking to you and your authors along the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.